I never anticipated entering his residence that afternoon. The whole incident began as a well-intentioned oversight, born from neighborly worry. That morning, my husband had departed for a work-related journey, leaving me to another solitary day of housekeeping and mindless social media browsing. Sometime around midday, an unusual sound emanated from the house next door. Initially, I dismissed it as faulty pipes, but as the water's steady rush persisted, anxiety crept in. Mr. Bennett, our neighbor of many years, was a 60-year-old widower who lived by himself. He carried himself with an innate grace and kindness that was admirable. While my husband and I had shared casual greetings with him through the years, we weren't particularly close. Nevertheless, I couldn't dismiss the nagging feeling that something might be amiss. The possibility of an accident crossed my mind. His entrance door was partially open, which only intensified my worry. I rapped gently, calling, "Mr. Bennett? Everything okay?" Silence was my only answer. I wavered, uncomfortable with the thought of entering uninvited. Yet the persistent sound of running water grew more concerning, and my mind conjured worst-case scenarios. What if he'd lost consciousness? What if he desperately needed assistance? I ventured inside, my pulse quickening. The front room was immaculate and hushed, with just a subtle trace of cologne in the air. I followed the sound toward the washroom. Its door was slightly ajar, allowing wisps of steam to escape into the corridor. "Mr. Bennett?" I called once more with increased volume. That's when I spotted him. He was standing beneath the shower spray, his back facing me, water flowing over his muscular shoulders. The steamy bathroom mirror offered just enough reflection for me to inadvertently witness the scene. I stood paralyzed, horrified by my intrusion. Before I could make my escape, he shifted slightly, catching my reflection in the mirror. Though surprise registered in his eyes, his expression held no trace of anger or embarrassment, only a peculiar serenity. He swiftly reached for a towel, securing it around his waist as he emerged from the shower. I deeply apologize." I fumbled with my words, feeling heat rise to my face. The running water concerned me, and I feared something was wrong. His gentle laugh resonated warmly through the space. "Don't worry about it. I should have secured the door. You were simply showing concern." His response completely disarmed me. Where most would have shown irritation, he appeared almost entertained. There was no discomfort in his demeanor as he stood there, droplets falling from his silver-flecked hair. If anything, his self-assured composure only heightened my embarrassment. "I should leave," I stammered, retreating backward. As I turned to make my hasty exit, his gentle voice stopped me. "Please wait. I appreciate your concern. It means a lot that someone would check on me." Those words echoed in my thoughts long after I made it back home. I tried convincing myself it was nothing more than a brief encounter, an innocent moment. But in my heart, I recognized that something fundamental had changed. The subsequent days were filled with an unusual mixture of intrigue and discomfort. I made conscious efforts to avoid encountering Mr. Bennett, too mortified to look him in the eye. Still, his image persisted in my thoughts. It wasn't merely his physical presence that lingered. It was his composed demeanor, his gracious nature. Rather than displaying anger or discomfort, he had shown nothing but understanding. One day, while I was tending to the shrubbery in my yard, his voice caught me off guard. "You seem to have quite the talent for gardening," he remarked warmly, resting against the fence dividing our properties. My immediate reaction was to mumble a response and leave, but his welcoming tone put me at ease. "It's more like constant warfare than actual skill." I responded with a forced chuckle. He laughed softly, leaning in closer. You're doing far better than I could. My wife was always the one with the gardening expertise. His features softened, a trace of melancholy crossing his face. I haven't maintained her plants well. Couldn't quite keep up. The raw honesty in his voice made me stop what I was doing. I'd be happy to help, I found myself offering before I could reconsider. That marked the beginning. The subsequent days fell into a comfortable pattern. I would spend time in his garden, helping restore the overgrown plants and neglected flower beds. He would work alongside me, sharing tales about his beloved wife, his teaching career, and the journeys he'd dreamed of but never taken. His storytelling had an enchanting quality, warm and rhythmic, like a familiar melody. Initially, it seemed purely neighborly, a simple connection between two people. But I noticed his gaze lingering longer than necessary sometime. I caught the way his expression softened at my laughter, how his hand would occasionally brush against mine as we worked together. I couldn't ignore how my heart fluttered during these moments. One day, as we admired our work in the restored garden, he offered me some lemonade. Our fingers touched momentarily, and I felt an electric current, as if something in the atmosphere had changed. We stood frozen for a moment. You've brought more life to this garden than I have in years, he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. It's really nothing, I whispered, my voice barely audible. It's far from nothing, he replied, his voice carrying a weight that made my heart skip. I glanced away, attempting to dismiss the moment with a nervous laugh. Perhaps we both found what we needed. You, a helping hand, and me, someone to show me there's still joy to be discovered. He continued, his words measured, his eyes fixed on mine. I struggled to find the right words. One part of me wanted to retreat, to remember my marriage vows, to label this as simple neighborly assistance. Yet another part felt inexplicably drawn to him, unable to deny the electricity between us. That pivotal evening was hushed, accompanied by gentle raindrops tapping on the window panes. Earlier, my husband had called to extend his business trip by another week. I'd pretended to be understanding during our conversation, but internally, I felt suffocated by an overwhelming sense of solitude. Visiting Mr. Bennett hadn't been my intention that evening, yet somehow I ended up at his doorstep, clutching a plate of freshly baked cookies, my attempt at keeping busy. When he answered, his genuine smile and delighted expression warmed something inside me. Are these for me? He asked, motioning toward the cookies. I thought you might enjoy something homemade, I replied, feeling somewhat silly but rooted to the spot. His invitation inside led us to his comfortable living room, where the fireplace's warmth provided a stark contrast to the cool evening air. Our conversation flowed naturally, as it always did, covering countless topics. But this evening held a different quality. An unspoken intimacy hung in the air, acknowledged silently by both of us. When I placed my glass on the coffee table, he reached to prevent it from falling. Our hands met, and rather than withdrawing, we remained still. Looking up, I found his gaze intense, questioning. Feel free to leave if you're uncomfortable, he murmured, his voice steady despite a hint of uncertainty. I'm perfectly comfortable, I whispered back, the words emerging unbidden. Something shifted in that moment. He moved closer, and I remained still. The distance between us vanished, and his kiss, when it came, was soft and tentative at first. The kiss quickly transformed, fueled by months of unacknowledged desire. My conscience screamed at the wrongness of it all. Every rational thought told me to stop. Yet in that moment, nothing else seemed significant except his embrace. The way he made me feel completely alive and truly wanted. Time lost all meaning. Outside, the rainfall intensified, but within these walls, only our synchronized breathing and the gentle crackling of the fire broke the silence. He paused momentarily, his eyes searching mine, offering a silent opportunity to withdraw, to say no. But I remained still. In the aftermath, we sat wordlessly, the magnitude of our actions settling around us like a heavy cloak. His hand found mine, holding it with tender care, his thumb creating gentle circles on my skin. "The last thing I wanted was to bring complications to your life," he whispered. Words failed me completely. My mind was a tempest of conflicting emotions, crushing guilt intertwined with burning desire, paralyzing fear dancing with unexpected liberation. Shame crept through my consciousness, as it should have. Yet another part of me, a part I'd never acknowledged before, felt strangely unfettered, as if I'd escaped constraints I hadn't even realized were binding me. That night, I lingered far too long, departing only when the downpour subsided. The walk home felt endless, my heart laden with emotion, my thoughts a chaotic maze of uncertainty. What had I allowed to happen? And why, despite every rational thought, did I yearn to experience it again? The subsequent days merged into one another, filled with alternating waves of remorse and desire. Each look at my husband felt like a knife of betrayal. Every solitary moment flooded my mind with vivid recollections of that night. I repeatedly told myself it was a one-time lapse, never to be repeated. Yet the persistent ache in my chest suggested otherwise. Initially, Mr. Bennett and I maintained our distance, as if mutual avoidance could somehow erase our actions. But the crushing weight of our unspoken words became unbearable. One evening, drawn by an invisible force, I found myself at our shared fence line, where he stood waiting as if anticipating my arrival. "I've been reflecting on our situation," he spoke softly, his gaze unwavering, "and causing you pain is the last thing I want." "I feel the same," I managed, my voice unsteady. In truth, my own desires remained a mystery to me. He exhaled deeply, resting against the fence. "For years, I've lived in solitude, convincing myself it was enough. Then you appeared, and suddenly—" He trailed off, struggling to articulate his thoughts. "None of this was ever part of my plan." Tears threatened to spill from my eyes. "I'm equally responsible. I chose to—" "Please don't," he gently cut in. "We share this responsibility, but it isn't right for you or your marriage." His words should have provided relief, but they only intensified the ache. "What's our next step?" He paused before reaching for my hand. "We move forward. We let this fade into memory." But I knew forgetting wouldn't be as simple as speaking those words. The tension between us persisted, despite our mutual efforts to maintain distance. Each inadvertent encounter, every exchanged look, reopened wounds that refused to heal. Meanwhile, my husband continued his daily routines, unaware of my inner turmoil, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever before. One night, my husband questioned my recent emotional withdrawal. His unexpected inquiry caught me unprepared. For a brief moment, I contemplated revealing everything. Yet, the paralyzing fear of destroying my life held me back. I fabricated an excuse, blaming exhaustion and life's pressures. He accepted my explanation without further questioning. The burden of my deception remained heavy. Mr. Bennett, honoring his word, began distancing himself. He no longer appeared at our shared fence, ceased extending invitations, The pain of his absence cut deeper than anticipated, though I convinced myself it was necessary. I channeled my energy into salvaging my marriage, attempting to restore what I'd neglected. Still, occasional glimpses of him in his garden would surface. Each sighting renewed the familiar heartache. As months drifted by, life gradually resumed its normal rhythm. Yet the memory of that evening, of our shared intimacy, remained eternally present. It surfaced in quiet moments, inhabiting the spaces between thoughts. I frequently wondered if he experienced similar feelings, if his thoughts of me mirrored mine of him. Eventually, there was no definitive conclusion, no tidy ending. Only the silent acknowledgement that certain decisions leave permanent marks. And some connections, however brief, irreversibly alter who we become.